Hi, let me give you a little bit of background about the history of the 3015 intermittent fitness test. As a strength and conditioning coach and player of a French handball team performing at the 4th French level, I was at this present time using a straight and linear test such as the University of Montreal track test to evaluate the fitness of our player. I was also using the final speed of the test to individualize high-intensity training sessions. When we were performing long intervals at submaximal intensity, everything was pretty fine, and I still see us well performing intervals over 5, 8 or even 10 minutes with no problem. But later on in the season, when we started to implement supra-maximal intensity shuttle-based runs indoor, things started to be a bit more complex. For example, some players were struggling while others were having an easy time. And that was still a bit surprising because, as I said, I was using an individual reference for each of them and then using the same percentage, like 120% for example, of this final University of Montreal track test for each player. So I was expecting kind of similar cardiovascular responses. But in fact, players had very different athletic and anthropometric profiles. Some were tall, some were short, some were fast, some were slow, some had good explosive powers, others not. And I started to realize that those physical capacity and others, like likely chain of direction ability, recovery capacity, anaerobic power, and speed and explosiveness, for example, were probably more important than purely aerobic fitness when it comes to the response, the physiological demands to these high-intensity runs, including chain of direction. And at this time, for the first time, I thought about the idea of finding a new way to evaluate all these physical capacities together. But it then took me about a year of readings, talks, chats with colleagues to finally come up with the final protocol. And I probably tried myself over about 30 different versions of the protocols on different venues, different surfaces, different length of effort, recovery, and so on. And I came up with the 30-second effort, including either 40 or 20-meter shuttle runs during those 30 seconds, depending on the version, interspersed with 15 seconds of recovery, with a speed increment of 0.5 km per hour. Today, the test is now used almost everywhere in the world. I receive daily requests from users in this setting, and this is by far the most rewarding gift I could have ever dreamt of.
Let's start now to dive a bit deeper into the physiology and the performance principles of the 3015 intermittent fitness test. As I just explained, I felt myself limited to prescribe HIIT using either the VO2 max or the incremental test, for the main reasons that they do not capture the overall picture of the different physiological variables of importance during team or racket-based specific HIIT sessions. While there is no doubt that aerobic power, so VO2 max, and running economy are determinant for those two tests, those velocities don't tell anything about a player's ability to turn and recover between efforts, for example, and their relationship with the anaerobic system is difficult to establish. The first important aspect of physiological responses to high-intensity runs, including change of direction, is the one related to the cost of the turns. Compared with straight-line running, turning requires an additional energy output, mainly related to the additional efforts of braking, turning, and re-accelerating after the turn. In the example shown here, we can see how a poor versus a good economy affects the rate of VO2 increase during an incremental test. We can see that the player with a poor change of direction ability presents a very fast increase in VO2 throughout the stages, which allows him to only reach 14 km per hour when he reaches his own VO2 max. In contrast, as a result of a better economy and therefore a slower rate of VO2 increase, the player with a better changes of direction ability reaches his VO2 max at 17 km per hour. In other terms, with the same aerobic power, the second player is able to run 3 km faster than the first, thanks to his better economy when turning. This very important aspect is however present during the large majority of high-intensity sessions performed with shuttles. So since the assessment of change of direction ability is missed when using straight-line incremental test, the inclusion of changes of direction is key during incremental testing. The second very important aspect of physiological responses to high-intensity runs that needs to be considered when testing, and programming of course, is related to the so-called metabolic inertia, both at the onset of exercise and during the recovery between the intervals. In fact, exactly as exemplified with the importance of change of direction ability, the faster the oxidative inertia at exercise onset and the faster the inter-effort recovery, the better the exercise tolerance and the better the ability to repeat high-intensity efforts. In the present example, again, we can see how two players with a similar VO2 max can perform pretty differently during an intermittent test. The player with faster oxidative inertia and better inter-effort recovery being able to reach faster speed. For that reason again, in addition to the introduction of change of directions to incremental tests, there is a need to make those incremental tests intermittent and therefore to introduce rest between short effort periods. Within the same lines, and similar to what we just mentioned for testing, programming HIIT without taking changes of direction and recovery abilities into consideration may result in sessions with different aerobic, anaerobic, and neuromuscular demands, which likely prevents the standardization of training load, limits the ability to target specific physiological and neuromuscular adaptations. To overcome the limitations inherent with the measurement of VO2 max, the 3015 was developed for intermittent exercise and changes of direction-based intermittent prescription. The 3015 was designed in the year 2000 and presents a simple evolution of the former incremental field test from Luc Léger, such as the continuous and straight-line University of Montreal track test generally performed on a 400-meter track, or the famous 20-meter shuttle run test. The principle of the 3015 is pretty simple, and as already mentioned, it consists in repeated 40 or 20-meter shuttle runs during 30 seconds, interspersed with 15 seconds of active walking recovery, with a speed increment of 0.5 km/h per stage. Here we can see the area prepared for the 3015 and examples of two intermittent runs. For the run at 8.5 km/h, which requires to run about 69 meters in 30 seconds, athletes start at line A, run to line C while crossing line B and then return. After crossing line B again, they stopped after 8 meters and walk to line A during the 15-second recovery to be ready for the next stage. For the run at 11.5 km/h, which requires to run about 91 meters in 30 seconds, players start at line A, make one complete round trip and stop after 9.5 meters when going towards line B. Then walk to line B during the 15 seconds of recovery for the next start. Note that the calculation of targeted distance during those runs takes into account the time needed for the direction changes. Let's see now how the test looked like in live, such as here in Adelaide with the Crows back in 2013.
End of stage at running speed 17. Next start, line A. Running speed 17.5.
Alright, in this slide, we can see a selection of performances at the test across representative sports and playing standards for women athletes. What can be seen from the graph is that VIFT, that's how we call the final velocity at the end of the test, tends to increase with age and playing standard, with the highest values recorded so far being those measured in national team players in soccer and field hockey. It is also important to see the spread of this data, confirming the fact that in team sports, even though it's important to be fit, technique and tactic awareness are often of greater importance for success, and that players differing in fitness VIFT performance can still perform in the same age group or at the same playing standard. This slide presents another selection of performance across representative sports and playing standards for men. As for women, the older the athletes and the better the playing standard, the greater the 30-15 performance. The highest values I can find in my database were collected in AFL and national teams in field hockey and rugby 7. This slide shows also how VIFT is related to the important aspect of the anaerobic speed reserve. It is well established that once VO2 max is reached, the additional energy provided during a supramaximal effort is derived mainly from anaerobic resources. Therefore, for a given VO2 max, the greater the anaerobic speed reserve, the greater the number of supra VO2 max stages completed, and the faster the VIFT. If we look precisely at panel B, we can see that a player with a greater anaerobic speed reserve is likely to reach, for a similar VO2 max, a couple of more stages during the 30-15. Since the anaerobic speed reserve, or at least the proportion of the anaerobic speed reserve used, influences what can be done during a high-intensity interval training session, the use of VIFT and not VO2 max enables practitioners to program a similar workout load for players differing in locomotor profile in terms of anaerobic and neuromuscular demands. Panel C illustrates again, but within this specific graphical representation, the importance of changes of direction abilities and inter-effort recovery capacities on the VIFT reached, since both influence directly the energetic cost of running during the test, as we discussed at the start of this video. Considering that running economy determines the speed reached for a given VO2 max, a player with a poor changes of direction and or a poor inter-effort recovery capacity will have a greater energetic cost of running and will present a lower VO2 max and therefore a slower VIFT. Again, the great interest of the 30-15 is that it takes into account changes of direction, inter-effort recovery capacity and anaerobic speed reserve into consideration, and therefore represents a more accurate tool to adjust training distances based on these individual qualities. We can see here where VIFT sits in terms of exercise intensity. As designed, VIFT is considered as supramaximal since it is well above V incremental test and V VO2 max by about 20%. Let's now finish with some practical aspects of implementation. Once the VIFT is known for each player, it is then pretty easy to set up individual distances for each of them. In the example shown here, a player with a VIFT of 19 km per hour will have to run about 58 meters during a 10-second high-intensity run at 110% of VIFT. In contrast, a player who may have finished the test with a VIFT of 15 will only run over 46 meters during those 10 seconds. It is also important to note that since VIFT is about 15 to 25% faster than VO2 max or V incremental test, it is necessary to adjust the percentages of VIFT used when programming. To make this individual prescription easier and pain-free, I have designed a spreadsheet that automatically calculates running distances based on VIFT. This document is freely available upon request using the links provided in the new and free 30-15 app. Finally, when it comes to implementing heat in the field over shuttles to introduce change of direction, as many of us do, an important adjustment to consider is the additional energy output of change of direction that we discussed in some of the previous slides of this video. Therefore, in addition to the fraction of VFT used, in this specific context, the additional time needed to change of direction must also be considered to match the straight line run metabolic load equivalent. In the example shown here, and using the spreadsheet that we referred to in the previous slide, the running distance of 72 meters with 2 turns is then brought to 65 meters with 3 turns. While robust scientific evidence about this change of direction correction factor is still lacking, in practice, a player's height and training volume can be considered for individual adjustments, with smaller and more trained athletes typically presenting better change of direction ability, therefore requiring a lower correction factor. After almost 20 years of use, however, the simple correction factor used in the spreadsheet has proven to be effective and sufficient. To finish this video, let's look closer now at 3 interesting cases, which are actually 3 professional handball players I was working with at the time I designed the test. The first player, Christian, had a clearly aerobic profile. He had a high aerobic capacity, but poor explosive strength and a low anaerobic speed reserve. The second player had what we call a mixed profile. He had a high aerobic capacity, good explosive strength, and a moderate anaerobic speed reserve. The third player had a so-called anaerobic profile, a high explosive strength, moderate aerobic capacity, and a large anaerobic speed reserve. The performance at the University of Montreal track test, so as I recall, is continuous and perfectly straight line, was actually in line with their profile, with the first and second players outperforming by far the third player. However, when performing the 30-15, the picture completely changed, and the player with a high anaerobic profile was able to almost catch up the others, likely compensating his lack of aerobic power with his good quality to turn and tolerate supramaximal efforts. The player with a mixed profile had in fact the best absolute performance, which is consistent with the fact that VFT is a compound physical capacity, as we already mentioned earlier. Now, let's see how the 2 different tests translate into heat prescription. This example is related to my personal history that I commented on in the intro of this video. Let's see the numbers now. When we moved to training with those 3 players, and when we implemented a heat session with short intervals over shuttles runs, there were pretty large variations in their heart rate responses, as exemplified by the CV of 10%, even though the same percentage of their UMTT running speed was used. Why? Simply because UMTT speed doesn't reflect change of direction and recovery abilities. For that reason, the actual speed at which the player with the greater anaerobic profile could perform the heat session was largely underestimated. When in contrast, we use VFT as the reference speed to prescribe running distances, their heart rate response were all very homogeneous and CV decreased by 3%, simply because the test had equalized the performance level of the players, and we could then adjust accordingly the running targets. Finally, the last point that was worth a discussion here was about the comparison between the 30-15 and the yo-yo test. I received many messages from people that have been using the yo-yo, but I still struggle to get a good prescription with it. I encourage them obviously to rather use the 30-15 for a few reasons. While the peak speeds reached in the different yo-yo tests are well correlated and have similar physiological requirements that of the 30-15, their relationship to VVO2 max and the anaerobic speed reserve differs substantially. For instance, as shown on the graph on the left, the relationship between VYOYO and V incremental test and VVO2 max is speed dependent. What I mean is that when running at VYOYO, slow and less fit athletes already use a proportion of their anaerobic speed reserve, while in contrast, fitter athletes run below their VVO2 max. In contrast, as shown on the graph on the right, VIFT is consistently supramaximal, so that the proportion of the anaerobic spirit reserve that is used when running at VIFT is similar for all athletes, irrespective of their fitness. For this reason, only VIFT can be used accurately for training prescription. So, to wrap up this video, I wish to summarize the pros and cons of the main test used in the field. The main point that I want to make here is that the so-called level of specificity with regard to a given sport shouldn't be the main reason to choose an incremental test, especially because of the need for training prescription. For example, while typical continuous straight-line tests such as the University of Montreal track test are not really team sport specific, they are still well designed to assess VO2 max, and therefore they can still be used efficiently to prescribe submaximal exercise and long intervals near or close to VO2 max. Both the yo-yo and the 30-15 may simultaneously evaluate aerobic fitness, anaerobic power, changes of direction, ability and recovery, and so on, and can therefore both be defined as highly specific to team sport. But as we discussed earlier, only VIFT can be used for training prescription. To conclude, for different reasons discussed in the previous slides, and since the 30-15 can be used to both assess overall fitness and to program training, it appears to be by far the best tool for team and racket sports. You just now have to download the app, the free app, and get your players tested and program hit. Thanks for listening, and obviously feedbacks are always welcomed. Cheers!